Graffiti Through the Ages. From prehistoric rock art to modern day graffiti tags and street art, humans have been leaving their marks on the world around them for tens of thousands of years. We usually understand graffiti as written words or pictures, posters or stickers which are left on public and private spaces like walls and doors where we don't have permission to leave them. The word graffiti is often thought of as a modern and negative activity. However, graffiti can be and mean many things, and in this short video I'm going to focus on the more positive elements of graffiti, looking at both its historic origins and the creativity of modern marks.
Hello, my name is Emma Brining and I'm a first year PhD student in the Department of Archaeology at the University of York, researching historic graffiti and its contemporary significance. Today I'm going to go through a little bit of the history of graffiti and mark making and show you 4 different types of graffiti that you can make from home.
For our first activity, I'm going to show you how you can make a replica of a negative hand painting based on one from the Chauvet-Pont d'Arc cave in the south of France. In this cave, there's some of the oldest cave paintings in the world, believed to be about 30,000 years old. In the cave, there are a few different handprints which were made by blowing pigment made of red ochre over hands pressed against the cave surface. For this activity, you will need a piece of paper or card, an empty bottle with a spray top, a sponge and paintbrush, some red paint, or some crayons and pencils. If you have a spray bottle, you want to fill it with paint and some water and then give it a good shake. You then want to put your hand onto the piece of paper and probably with some newspaper or something protective to the table underneath, spray the paint directly onto your hand. Then when you're ready and you take your hand away, you reveal a negative handprint. Now if you don't have an empty spray bottle that you can use, you can always try it with a paintbrush and some of the red paint. Now you don't have to use red, it's just that we're mimicking the negative handprint from the cave. You then put your hand firmly onto the paper and with some paint on the end of your paintbrush, you paint all the way round your hand. Now a little warning, a lot of these activities, particularly the negative handprint, are going to get quite messy. When you're ready, you take your hand off and you can see your handprint underneath. Now we're going to try the activity again, this time with a sponge. You put a little bit of paint on the end of your sponge and then just as you did with the paintbrush, we're going to go all the way around the hand. And once again, when you're ready, you can take your hand off. Now as this is already getting quite messy and because there's evidence in the cave of positive handprints, we're going to have a go at that too using the sponge. Now you can use the paintbrush to do this as well. Now just cover your hand in paint and when you're ready, put it on the paper, press firmly down and voila, a positive handprint. Now for those of you that don't have paint at home, I'm going to show you how you can make a negative handprint using a pencil and something like a marker, a felt tip pen or colouring crayons. Now first of all you want to draw around your hand with the pencil as I've just shown you and then you can just draw around the hand. Here I'm just using a coloured crayon but I'm also going to use a marker as well. And there you go, you've got your negative handprint too. Although we wouldn't really refer to these cave paintings as graffiti, they do help us to see that humans have been painting on walls from very early on in civilization. When we think of graffiti, we often think of it as something which is very modern, but as we've previously shown, mark making has a very long history. It is believed that the term graffiti was first used by archaeologists in the 1850s when they wanted a word to describe ancient inscriptions left in the ruins of Pompeii, Italy. The word graffiti actually comes from the plural form of the Italian graffio, meaning to scratch or scribble. For this activity you need some clay, a rolling pin, a pencil and some paper. Now I'm just going to use the paper and the pencil to create a design before I use my clay. I've decided to create a flower and lace design inspired by some graffiti left in one of the cell blocks at Richmond Castle by lace maker and conscientious objector William Thomas Angrave. Once you've created and are happy with your design, you want to get a piece of clay, probably about the size of your hand, and put it onto a clean surface. Then you get a rolling pin or something similar and you roll out the clay until it is about 1 centimetre thick. We're then going to cut around the edges of the clay to leave a clean shape. Here I'm just using a plastic knife, but you can use something similar and you may want to get a parent or adult to do this for you. Next you want to get your pencil ready as we're going to start making marks into the clay with what we're going to call today little scratches. Using my flower and lace design from earlier, I'm now going to try and copy this onto the clay itself. Don't worry if you make a mistake, you can always roll out the clay again. Here's a little tip for you, make sure that you don't press the pencil down too hard. You don't want it going through all the way to the other side of the clay. Now if you don't have clay at home, you could always try making some flower clay, or you could even use something like Play-Doh to try the technique out for yourself. Now when you're happy with your design and you're all finished, you can take your pencil and you can make some little marks into the clay all the way through. So you just want to push your pencil through. This means that when your clay is dry, you can then hang it up somewhere. And here I have some of my final designs when they dried and hardened. For our third activity, we're going to have a look at more modern graffiti and learn how to make a graffiti tag with bubble letters. A tag refers to a graffiti writer's signature and is part of their identity or brand. Modern graffitists tend to use stylized writing of a name or symbol to gain recognition and respect from other graffitists. So you'll need paper, a pencil, a black marker pen and coloured pencils or crayons, as well as a bit of imagination. In this activity, we're going to create bubble letters, a traditional graffiti letter style where the letters look a bit puffy and bloated, like bubbles. For my graffiti name, I've just kept it simple, going with tag, inspired by the activity, and 42, inspired by the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. As I've just done, you want to take your graffiti name and write it onto the piece of paper, making sure that the letters aren't too close. When you've done this, you then draw around the letters using them as a guide. You'll then be able to create letter shapes that look a bit like a bubble. Don't worry if your bubble letters overlap a bit, you may actually want that as part of your design. When you're happy with your letters, you can then draw around them again using a felt tip pen or marker. Graffiti tags are often thought of quite negatively, but graffiti culture isn't about being disrespectful. Modern graffiti is often used by individuals who have felt misunderstood, and they use graffiti as a form of self-expression and create a new name or pseudonym for themselves, which they publicly display. When you finish outlining your tag, you can then add some designs to the inside of the bubble letters I've just shown you, and then start colouring it in, whether you have crayons, chalk, marker pens, felt tip pens or paint, whatever you fancy using. When you've done all this, you'll then be left with your own bubble letter graffiti tag. For our final graffiti art design, I'm going to show you how you can make a graffiti stencil. Using stencils and stickers slowly became more popular as graffitists wanted to create quick designs so they were less likely to be seen and get in trouble. Graffitists can create designs before they leave home and then create quick but detailed designs in the street using a brush or spray can to paint through the stencil. You'll need a few pieces of card, a pencil, scissors, paint and a paintbrush, or if you don't have paint you can use pencil crayons, and optional items include tape, a spray top bottle, a paint roller or a sponge. I'm going to show you how you can make a couple of different stencil designs. First, we're going to make a symmetrical design with random shapes. Start by folding your card in half and then fold it in half again. Then get your scissors and start cutting shapes into the folded card. You may want to get an adult to help you with this. All you need to do is cut out various shapes from the card, whatever shapes you like. Remember to be extra careful when using scissors, and you can always ask an adult to do this bit for you if you're not very confident. When you've finished cutting out shapes from the card, you can then unfold it and you'll be left with a stencil design. For our second stencil design, we're going to use the bubble letters from the third activity and then cut the letters out using scissors. You then need one of your stencil design, some pieces of card or paper, and your chosen materials from the list earlier. I have chosen to create my first design using paint and a paintbrush. You want to put your stencil on top of your piece of paper and then start filling in the gaps using the paint. Make sure to press your stencil down firmly so it doesn't move around and so you're also left with a more crisp design. I'm then going to try and use a sponge, and here you just have to do exactly the same as before with the paintbrush. Press the stencil down firmly and fill in the gaps. Feel free to use whatever paint you have at home or colours that you particularly like. You can also blend your colours into each other as well. Don't worry if you don't have paint at home, you can always use your stencil with some pencil crayons, chalk or felt tips. Use the stencil as a guide to draw your shapes and you can then create the same design over and over again. Here I'm using the spray bottles from the first activity with different paints and my stencil. This one can get quite messy. When you finish, you then just lift off your stencil to reveal your design underneath. Finally, I'm just going to have a go at using my bubble letter stencil on my graffiti wall here. I'm just using tape to hold the stencil down and then I'm going to use a sponge to paint on top. You may notice on my graffiti wall that I've used all the different graffiti art techniques that we've learned in this video. When you're happy that you've painted over all the shapes in your stencil design, you can then slowly take off the tape and reveal your design underneath. So there we have it. In just under 10 minutes I've shown you how you can create 4 different graffiti art designs inspired by graffiti, as well as giving you a little bit of history of graffiti and mark making through the ages. I hope you have fun at home making your own designs and getting creative with graffiti art.